Democrats just lost everything. They control nothing. They control, I mean, they don't control the House, they don't control the Senate, they don't control the White House, and they don't control the Supreme Court. So now is the time to break some shit, right? And break some China.
They do control the email lists that continue to ask for money.
Well, that's true.
They still have that.
It is a progressive-leaning network. But nobody is, to the frustration at times of many elected Democrats, it is not a mouthpiece of the Democratic Party.
And 4 hours of Joe Scarborough shouldn't be allowed in this country. and then like Rachel Maddow, like it's schizophrenic at times. And that what Donald Trump is doing is he's actually explicitly exposing the dark heart of how the world actually works. Here at MSNBC, do they come to you every day and go, here's what we think is important preserve and fight for whatever.
No, everybody gets a zillion press releases and pitch calls, but no.
No. I'm talking about the head of it.
Oh, no. You determine, we determine, each of us for our shows, here's what I'm going to cover today, and here's what I'm going to talk about, and here's what I think is important, which there's an independence-ish of that. And there also is, you're not waiting to be told what to say about anything. You're going to say what you think. So people can trust that, and that is a good thing.
See, I disagree with that. I think it's not that you're able to be independent. It's that you're then a prisoner purely to the minute by minutes. Purely,
you mean in terms of ratings?
The ratings, incentives, and all those other things. If you don't have the ideological component, right, then you don't have a governing authority of editorial authority, right? The greatest trick Roger Ailes ever played was he delegitimized editorial authority while exercising absolute steel trapdoor editorial authority.
The greatest thing he did because it led them to be an arm piece, a mouthpiece of the right wing.
It led them to be exactly what he wanted it to be, which is an effective expression of his worldview. And
MSNBC, I am unburdened by not having, I can share whatever I think. I have obviously worked in Democratic politics for 20 years. I don't hide anything about that. It is a progressive leaning network. But nobody is, to the frustration at times of many elected Democrats, it is not a mouthpiece of the Democratic Party.
See, Jon Stewart's absolutely right here. If ever he runs as a Democrat, which I think he will one day, if he runs for the Democratic Party, he's going to be a problem. I'm not his biggest fan, but he's going to be a problem because he does call out the BS. He called out the COVID being made in the lab. He's had his moments, and he's not a far leftoid. He is very left, but he's willing to call out the BS. And what he's doing here is exactly that. Her saying that we're about rule of law and these institutions, look, they're all being exposed. And that's one thing about the left right now. None of them are saying anything about what is being exposed by Elon Musk and his team. And I think it would go a long way for them, and I hope they don't do it, but it would go a long way for them to be like, yeah, okay, we didn't know that was going on. This is shady and corrupt. We don't want this for the American people. You're allowed to have your own voice. It would go a long way for them, but they're so shady and they toe the party line so much. And for her to sit there and saying she's not a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party, where everything they do is orange man bad, is ludicrous. Let's get to the next clip.
This was actually one of the things in the weeks after the election where I felt like it wasn't that I was shocked out of my mind that Trump won. I mean, I've been in politics. I've traveled around the country. But how did this happen and why did this happen and what can be learned from it, which I think is pivotal to understanding in order to figure out how to move forward, which I think is the point, is part of what I'm hearing from what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's one answer. And I know that there are efforts in different places to explore that question. I think the DNC is doing one. I don't know what will come out of that. I'm keeping my expectations low. But that's sort of, to me, it is a multitude of things. It is how the Democrats are communicating about issues, but it's also, maybe it's a policy question too. And let's not all just call it a messaging issue, because it may not just be a messaging issue. Mm-hmm. It's misinformation and disinformation. And that's not just, everybody shorthands this as, if Democrats only appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know that he's inviting many. Maybe he is, but that's not the only answer. I think there's a lot of layers of it. It's also that kind of candidates people run. That's not a hack on Kamala Harris. I mean, in different races as well. And sometimes there have been purity tests in the Democratic Party that aren't particularly constructive. The purity test should be, can you win? And will you be a part of the caucus? Because the majority helps make things happen. I don't have an answer yet, but this is the thing that I want to explore.
Do you think the Democratic Party is principled?
I do think that, and sometimes I don't want to say too principled because that is not a good thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I think principled, yes. The Democratic Party writ large are defenders of institutions that make the country run, the rule of law. This is part of the problem, right?
Right.
They are believers in the separation of government.
Here's where we're getting into it. So I think other people would say that's a veneer. And that what Donald Trump is doing is he's actually explicitly exposing the dark heart of how the world actually works. Like that message hasn't gotten through because I'm hearing an awful lot about separation of powers and very little about defending USAID. I'm not hearing a lot about here's the specific program that is so valuable and by not funding that, this is what we lose. There's been, to be fair, there's been some attempts at that, but the overwhelming majority has been, we are sleepwalking into a constitutional crisis. Again, taking the bait of the larger thing and not defending the efficiency or value of the programs.
I would take it just one step farther. And I worked at State Department. I think USAID is a tremendous institution. I don't think it should be a front and center top messaging argument. Should people in Congress defend and use every lever of their power to prevent the Trump administration from gutting it? Yes, because they play a pivotal role around the world, cracking down on corruption, defending a free press, a million things. But I guess when it comes to how the Democrats are communicating with the public, the things that the Trump administration are doing that they should be talking about more, in my view, are getting access to people's personnel information, their social security data, anybody who's applied for a government job, that's millions of people. Halting programs, which a judge this week said they haven't actually put back in place all of the funding halting of the funding that they said they had. Those are the kind of things that if you are not really, if you think government is, government's not popular, as you all know. Congress is not popular.
Why would that be?
Right, I don't know. Institution's not popular.
True.
So if you're trying to reach people who are like, ugh, government, Washington, then talk about how this program that's being cut off is helping your kids have early childhood education. It's helping you get Medicaid access. It's helping you farmers have subsidies.
But that seems obvious, Jen. So
yes,
why
it is.
Are they not doing it?
I wish I knew the answer to that question.
That is the most painful sigh I have ever heard.
Before we get to the next clip, if you can smash that thumbs up button for your boy, that goes a long way into helping me out. And also, if it's not your first time here and you're not yet subscribed, hopefully this could be the video that I earn your subscription. Let's go.
I've been shocked by how undemocratic the Democratic Party can be.
Tell me more, what do you mean by, I don't disagree with you necessarily, but what do you mean by that?
By putting their foot on the scales to get, make sure that Hillary Clinton comes out of the thing, or make sure that, that they're listening to that anger about the way that even the ACA, quite frankly, struck me as a very conservative.
You mean because it didn't have a public option in it?
Correct. That it didn't address the very thing that was causing the foundational upset. If I were to break this down narratively, what I think the Democrats have forgotten is government may not be perfect, but it's the only thing large enough to offset multinational corporate exploitation and corruption.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't act like that's urgent and that affects people's lives, then so if the big policies that we make are billions more dollars to insurance companies that we think are fucking people over left and right for their healthcare, so isn't that part of why people lost faith?
Yeah. So yes, I think we're saying, well, I'm trying to say something similar, which is this.
Boom, boom.
Which is Democrats just lost everything. They control nothing. They control I mean, they don't control the House, they don't control the Senate, they don't control the
Right.
White House, and they don't control the Supreme Court. So
Right.
now is the time to break some shit, right? And break some
Right.
China.
They do control the email lists that continue to ask for money.
Well, that's true.
They still have that. And 4 hours of Joe Scarborough shouldn't be allowed in this country. and then like Rachel Maddow, like it's schizophrenic at times. Like, yeah, I do think there should be some semblance of an idea that, look, they're kicking progressive ass right now. And if progressives don't organize their media, their think tanks and all that, it's going to continue to happen. It's chaos.
Well, I will say, broadly speaking, what I'm going to say Democrats, I'm going to say people on the left do not do that the right does very well is support within the system each other. I'm serious. Like, and what I mean by this is this, right?
Yeah.
Theo Von appears on Joe Rogan's show, right? He promotes what Joe Rogan's doing, but they all promote all of the things each other are doing and what the elected officials, I guess, are doing too. And the left is a little bit more kind of discombobulated in terms of supporting the different entities on the left. There is not a left ecosystem that matches the right ecosystem.
But Ailes didn't do that either. It was the principle, the ideological principles, not the party. He and Murdoch the same way. They're promoting an ideological worldview, right? That they believe is correct. And Theo Von and Joe Rogan, I think, are different animals than any of this. Like, I wouldn't say I don't think they're part of any machine. Don't
you think they're but they are still in the right wing ecosystem? Wouldn't you agree?
No, I would think they're in. No, I would consider them in a more probably libertarian comedic complex, more along the lines of, and if you watch or listen to their shows, a lot of times it's just pure like goofing off.
Has nothing to do with politics, and oftentimes, but
almost entirely.
But they are supportive of the Trump enterprise, is what I mean. So maybe I'm loosely putting them in that category.
I think they are supportive, but not. They are not relentless in the Trump enterprise. Like, they are not Charlie Kirk. They are not Ben Shapiro. Like, they are very different animals. They are not invested in the shit that you get picked up and like go to the headlines of media. But on balance, that's not what their shows are about.
Many people in Congress have come out, and Donald Trump came out saying Elon Musk doesn't have access to your personal information. They just don't. It's been debunked. Stop it. Stop with the lying. And the reason they don't come out and talk about how good these programs are is because they are not good. Especially when you talk about the education programs. Out of the top 40 countries in the world, you know where the grade school and high school level of the U.S. ranks? Last. Okay? So when you have Donald Trump cutting the Department of Education, well, I don't see that as a bad thing. And plus, the Department of Education is just there to help teachers these days. It's like teachers unit. We need to crack down on those, which are there to just cut down hours for teachers, make smaller classrooms for teachers, get higher pay for teachers, get more holidays for teachers. I'm not saying teachers don't deserve higher pay, but teachers union and the Department of Education are not there to help the children. They're not. But this USAID that she's talking about, it's because all the money was going to nonsense. That is why nobody is coming out talking about the good programs, because if you come out and talk about the good programs, you also got to talk about the bad ones. And there's a lot of them. Her talking about this as if Joe Rogan and Theo Von are these crazy right-wing people. But Joe Rogan, Theo Von, Joe Rogan was a libertarian for years, a pot-smoking libertarian that got messed with, and he just wanted to have Kamala on to have a conversation. This is the problem with the leftists, because they don't go on Theo Von and they don't go on Joe Rogan because they can't have a conversation like a normal freaking human being. And at the end of the day, people vote for people. We vote for human beings. And right now, I think it's great that we have real human beings in the White House. Like him or not, Donald Trump's a real human being. He's flawed and he's relatable because he's got flaws, because he's not perfect. RFK, you go to his social media, that's a real human being with his family, his kids. J.D. Vance with the kids cooking in the kitchen. Kamala Harris is like a puppet. She's a robot. You imagine Kamala Harris having a 3-hour conversation, non-scripted, without her talking points with Rogan. She would just cook herself. It would be impossible. It's not because Rogan and Theo Von and All these other podcasters only want right-wing people on there. Joe Rogan over the years has had tons of left-wing people. He's had Bernie Sanders on there, for Christ's sakes. He endorsed Bernie Sanders. But they can't go on because if they go on Rogan, they got to find a way to justify the nonsense. To justify how many genders there are in the world. To justify the border. To justify the economy. And they can't because it's unjustifiable. It's borderline treasonous what they've done to this country on the left. And this is why. Imagine Joe Biden on a podcast with Rogan, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz. Imagine Tim Walz with Rogan for 3 hours. I mean, I would pay money. Charge me money now. Unbelievable. Jon Stewart, when he decides to run, if ever he decides to run, he is going to be a problem, though. I am not his biggest fan. I think he has his moments, but he would be a strong candidate. He's relatable. The people on the left relate to him. They like him. They've always liked him. And he would be a much stronger candidate than anybody I can think of that they have on their party. So hopefully he doesn't. I don't think that right now he would beat Trump. I don't think that right now he would beat J.D. Vance. I think we got this locked in. But he would be a problem, and he would do a lot better than what people think. He would do a lot better than Kamala Harris. That's for sure, because he's called out the BS on multiple occasions. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that thumbs up button. Consider subscribing to the channel. Help it grow. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out, everybody.